The scanner beeped 3 times. Then it paused. Then it beeped again, slower, like it was confused about what it had just measured. I stood on the intake platform of the Interstellar Coalition Military Academy and watched the machine try to decide if I was real. The light ran over me from boots to crown, green and cold, and then the whole console flickered and ran the cycle again from the beginning. The cadet behind me, 7 feet of gray muscle, a drawn, built like someone had stacked 2 refrigerators on top of each other and given them a uniform, laughed. Not a mean laugh. The kind that comes out when something is just genuinely funny to you, and you have not yet developed the social awareness to care who hears it. The laugh sounded like a pipe bursting. I stepped off the platform. The intake officer, a tired-looking Ussan with 4 eyes and the expression of someone who had processed 12,000 cadets and still somehow had not retired, tapped the console twice with one long finger and then looked at me. "Human," she said. "Last I checked," I said. She typed something. The system accepted me. A bunk assignment printed out of the slot, and I took it without looking at the drawn, who was still processing what he'd found so funny. Lord have mercy, I thought. This is going to be a thing. My name is Mara Voss. I am 5'2" and 111 pounds, and I had earned my scholarship to ICMA the same way I had earned most things in my life, by outlasting circumstances that were supposed to stop me. The academy letter had arrived on a Tuesday. My mother had cried. My father had not said anything for a long time and then said, "Well, okay then." That was high praise from a man who measured words like they cost something. The academy was enormous in the way that things are enormous when they are built by a coalition of species, none of which share the same idea of appropriate scale. The corridors were wide enough for a Vethari to walk without turning sideways. The ceilings were high enough that I sometimes felt like I was standing at the bottom of a dry swimming pool. Everything hummed with recycled air and low-frequency station noise. A sound you stopped hearing after 3 days and then heard again every time you woke up at 200 and could not get back to sleep. My bunk bay held 6 cadets. A drawn, not the same one from intake, though they were similar enough in size that I made a note to check. 2 Bryn cadets with their silver-gray skin and their tendency to move in quiet synchronization. A Tilhari who was roughly the size of a large cat and spent the first 2 days near the ceiling where apparently her species preferred to rest, and a human boy named Owen Dale from somewhere in northern Canada, who was 6 feet tall and visibly relieved to see another human, even one my size. "They put us together," he said, like this was a conspiracy. "They put 6 cadets who fit in the leftover bunk assignments together," I said. "Don't read into it." My bunk was the top one. I had to jump to reach the rail. I did it without thinking about it, pulled myself up, and arranged my pack before anyone made a remark. No one did. I filed that away as a small win. The ranking board went up on the 3rd day. ICMA posted physical evaluation scores for the full intake class: reaction time, load capacity, endurance by species-adjusted metrics, and raw combat readiness projections. It covered one full wall of the main corridor outside the mess hall, and cadets gathered in front of it the way people gather in front of a car accident, not because they want to see something bad, but because they cannot seem to stop themselves. I was at the bottom. Not close to the bottom, not nearly the bottom, the actual bottom, with a gap between me and the next lowest score that was wide enough to park a shuttle in. Someone had put a small notation next to my name in the species-adjusted column that read, "See supplemental classification," which meant the standard metrics did not even have a category that fit me properly. I read the board once. Then I went to the mess hall and ate my ration, which was dense and gray and tasted like compressed cardboard, which was fine. I had eaten worse. Osek found me on the 4th day. He was the squad leader assigned to our integration unit, a Bryn, senior year, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had a reason to doubt yourself. He was not cruel the way people are cruel when they are angry. He was cruel the way people are cruel when they are performing for an audience, when contempt is just a way of showing everyone else where the hierarchy sits. He handed me a translated document, folded neatly, like a gift. I opened it. It was an internal evaluation brief. My brief. It had been generated by the Academy's performance projection system, and it said, in clear coalition standard, non-combat asset, recommend reassignment to logistics or support function. Thought you should know where you stand, Osek said. He smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind you give to someone you are waiting to break. No shame in it. Not every species is built the same. I read the brief a second time. Then I folded it and put it in my breast pocket. Well, isn't that something? I said. I walked past him and went to the training bay. The obstacle course assigned to our unit was calibrated for Class 3 species, Brin standard, roughly. Moderate physical demand built for species with consistent baseline strength, not built for humans, not built for me specifically. I ran it anyway. I fell off the third obstacle, got up, fell on the sixth, got up, made it through the 10th and collapsed at the finish line with my hands on my knees and my lungs doing something that was probably not technically approved by medical. Then I walked back to the start and ran it again. I finished the second run. Barely. Owen Dale found me in the corridor afterward, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, drinking water in small, slow sips because my hands were not entirely steady yet. "What are you doing?" he said. "Training," I said. "It's 300. "Yep." He stood there for a moment, looking at me with the expression of someone trying to decide whether what they are seeing is inspiring or deeply concerning. He went back to the bunk bay. I stayed in the corridor another 10 minutes until my hands steadied. Then I got up and went to bed. I was almost to the bay door when I realized I was not alone in the corridor. He was at the far end near the turn, 8 feet tall, 4 arms folded, 2 upper, 2 lower, in a configuration that I would later learn was the Vethari equivalent of standing at ease. His skin shifted in the low light, the faint bioluminescent pattern across his shoulders cycling slowly through blue and gold. He was not moving. He was just standing there, looking at me. Every other set of eyes in that academy had slid away from me by now. The drawn cadets looked and then looked somewhere more interesting. The Brin cadets catalogued and dismissed. Even Owen looked at me sometimes with a kind of helpless pity that I had learned to ignore. This one did not look away. I did not look away either, not because I was brave, because I was tired and my legs hurt and I did not have the energy left for social navigation. He looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then he turned and walked around the corner. His footsteps were so heavy that the floor vibrated faintly under my feet for 3 steps after he was gone. Mine did not vibrate anything. I filed that away too, not with bitterness, more like taking inventory. Knowing what you are and what you are not is not the same as being defeated by it. It is just arithmetic. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. I rarely did. But I got up when the lights came on, and I went to breakfast, and I ate the gray compressed ration, and I did not think about the brief in my breast pocket. I thought about it later, alone in the training bay. And then I went to run the course again. The Academy's performance projection system had called me a non-combat asset. It had access to every biological metric, every species classification, every physical data point that existed in coalition records. What it did not have access to was a winter in Ohio when I was 14 years old, and the distribution network failed for 6 months, and the county got nothing. And I had learned something about what a person is made of when there is nothing left to make it easy. The machine did not have a category for that. That was fine. I did not need it to. The mess hall had a specific kind of quiet in the early morning, not peaceful, just empty. The way a room is quiet when the people who fill it have not arrived yet. I liked that hour. I liked being in spaces before they became what other people made them. I was on my third morning of 500 meals when I noticed that the far table, the one with the full bench cleared around it, the one that every cadet somehow chose not to sit at even when the hall was crowded, had someone at it. He was eating, slowly, something dark and dense that I did not recognize. His forearms moved in alternating pattern, unhurried, and his eyes were on the window that looked out at the station's exterior panels and the dark beyond them. He did not look at me when I sat down 2 tables away. He did not look at anyone. But after a while I got the feeling, I could not have explained it, that he knew exactly where everyone in the room was. His name, according to the cadet registry I had read 3 times out of habit, was Kale Vor, Vethari, 4th year. No disciplinary record, no social record, no recorded conversation with another cadet in 14 months. The registry listed 14 months specifically. Someone had been counting. I ate my ration and did not stare, and when I left, his eyes were still on the window. Later, I would understand that the window had nothing to do with it. On day 8, the physical ranking board updated with week 1 training scores. I had moved up 4 places. Asek walked past the board and looked at my name, and then looked at me across the corridor, with an expression I had seen before on people who had decided I was a joke and were beginning to suspect the joke was on them. I did not say anything. I went to the training bay. On day 10, my Tilhari bunkmate, small, fast, perpetually nervous in the manner of her species, asked me why I ran the course at night. Because during the day there are people watching, I said. She tilted her head. Does that bother you? It bothers them, I said. When I fall, they want me to feel it. I adjusted my boot lacing. I don't give things away for free. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my people have a word for that, the not giving. What's the word? She said something in Tilhari that sounded like wind moving through a thin pipe. What does it mean? I said. She thought about it. It means keeping the warmth inside so the cold does not find it. I thought that was a pretty good word. I went to run the course. The hazing started on day 12. Not dramatically. Nothing that would read clearly on a report. Asek was too careful for that. It was the kind of pressure that exists in the space between what is policy and what is just the way things go when someone with seniority decides you do not belong. My equipment bag went missing from the bay and turned up 2 levels down in a storage corridor. My ration for Tuesday was swapped out for a species variant pack that was not calibrated for human digestion. I ate half of it before the nausea started, and I spent 2 days feeling like my stomach had been replaced with a rock. Nothing was ever done dramatically. Nothing was ever provable in the way that required action. I fixed it each time efficiently, without expression. This was, I discovered, more unsettling to Asek than if I had broken down. He knew the script. He had run it before. The script had a reaction written into it, frustration, tears, a request for transfer, a complaint that could be managed. What the script did not have was nothing. I gave him nothing. I fixed the problems and showed up the next day and ate my ration and ran the course and came back to the bay and slept 4 hours and got up and did it again. On the 15th day, I caught Asek watching me from the corridor entrance of the training bay, not mockingly, just watching. The expression on his face was something I recognized but could not name yet. I went back to running. Kaelvor began appearing. That was the only word for it. He did not join anything. He did not approach. He was simply present, at the edge of the mess hall, near the corridor where the simulation rooms were. Once, at the far end of the training bay, 4 arms resting in that at-ease configuration, watching me run the course with the same absolute stillness he brought to everything. Other cadets noticed. The Brin in my bunk bay, A quiet one named Sara who spoke rarely but observed everything, told me over rations one evening that Vithari did not look at things without reason. "What does the looking mean?" I asked. Sara ate a bite of her ration before answering. "Among their kind, sustained attention is a form of statement. They do not spend attention carelessly." "What kind of statement?" She looked at me steadily. "I do not know," she said. "I have not seen a Vithari look at a non-Vithari before." I ate the rest of my ration. I did not know what to do with that information, so I put it on the shelf in my mind where I kept things I did not have enough context to understand yet, and went back to the training bay. The simulation scores came out on day 19. Integrated Combat Theory, the class that ran tactical scenarios through a holographic system that assessed threat and response across species lines. Every cadet was rated by the simulation's enemy AI for priority targeting, which was the system's way of identifying who on the field the opposition would logically neutralize first. Low priority meant the AI read you as non-threatening. It allocated resources elsewhere. My rating was low priority. The professor, an Usin named Coordinator Vel, who had the particular exhaustion of someone who had been teaching young soldiers for decades and had stopped being surprised by anything, read the class results aloud. When she got to my rating, she paused for half a second. The pause was small. I noticed it. "The simulation calibrates based on biological threat metrics and physical projection data," she said, "to the room in general, not to me specifically. It is not a complete picture." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in 19 days. I wrote it down in my training log not because I needed the encouragement, but because I believed in accurate records. That evening, the equipment issue happened again. My training pack was gone from the bay, relocated, this time, to the corridor outside the waste processing unit on level 4. Someone had been creative. I retrieved it, checked the contents, made a note. I had been making notes since day 3. Dates, times, descriptions, location logs. Quiet, methodical, precise. The kind of record-keeping that requires patience so steady it is almost boring to describe. Almost. Owen Dale saw me writing in the log one night and said, "What are you doing?" "Building a case," I said. He looked at the log. "For how long?" "Until it's enough," I said. He did not say anything after that, but he started keeping his own logs about things he witnessed. He did not tell me he was doing it. I found out 3 weeks later and said nothing to him about it, which I think he understood as the "thank you" it was. On day 22, Asek found me at the equipment lockers. He had 2 other Bryn cadets with him, second years, both of them quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are there to witness something rather than participate. He was relaxed, easy, like someone who had already run the math and liked the answer. He told me he was filing a training evaluation report, that the report would document consistent substandard performance across physical, tactical, and integration metrics, that the report, once filed, would trigger an academic review that would assess my continued enrollment, that the timeline for a review decision was typically 5 days. "It's not personal," he said. "It is just the academy identifying where resources are best allocated. You are not built for this, Mara." He said my name like it was a small, breakable thing. I looked at him. I thought about February. The way cold gets into a house when there is not enough heat to push it back. The specific discipline of deciding which 3 things you allow yourself to want today, because wanting more than 3 things is a kind of waste you cannot afford. I thought about the log in my pack, with 22 days of documented incidents. "Bless your heart," I said. He blinked. That was not in the script. "You have never had to be hungry to do something," I said. "It shows." I picked up my training pack and walked past him to the bay. I filed my counter report the next morning. Documented, time-stamped, cross-referenced with the location logs. The ration incident noted with the specific caloric impact on a human physiology. Owen's witnessed accounts attached as supplemental. The kind of submission that takes a long time to read because it is thorough in a way that is slightly relentless. The review board opened a case. That evening I was in the simulation corridor running a scenario when the sensor at the end of the hall registered a presence. I did not stop the simulation. I ran it through. When I stepped out, Calvor was in the corridor, 4 arms folded, watching the space where the hologram had been. He turned and looked at me. 11 seconds. I counted them. Not because I was trying to, but because when everything else is quiet, the mind counts things automatically. Then he said in Coalition Standard, clear and even and low, "You wait." That was it. He walked past me. The floor hummed under his footsteps. Mine made no sound at all. I stood in the corridor for a moment. Lord have mercy, I thought. This is going to be more complicated than I planned. I went to bed. I slept 4 hours. I got up. I ran the course. The review board ruled in my favor on day 27. Osek's report was rejected on evidentiary grounds. He was placed on academic review himself, which was not a thing I had asked for specifically, but was a natural consequence of submitting a false evaluation against a cadet who had been quietly building a 22-day documented case against him. He did not come to the mess hall for 2 days. When he came back, he sat at a different table and did not look at me. I ate my ration. The compressed gray thing had started tasting better, or I had stopped tasting it, which amounts to the same thing. The drawn cadet from intake, his name was Bohr, I had learned eventually, and he was not mean, just large and accustomed to being the measure of things, stopped me outside the training bay on the 29th day. "You went up 12 places on the ranking board," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at me. He was thinking about something. I could see it the way you can sometimes see whether moving across an open field, slowly, visibly, from a distance. "How?" he said. "I keep showing up," I said. He looked like that was either the simplest or the most complicated answer he had ever received. He walked away still thinking about it. I went into the training bay. The simulation scores updated on day 31. My threat rating in the tactical AI was still low priority. I looked at the result for a moment. Then I closed the screen and went to the course and ran it until my legs said they were finished, and then I ran it one more time. I was not doing it for the AI. The AI worked with the data it had. It did not have all the data. That was fine. I knew what I was. More importantly, I was beginning to understand that something in that corridor, something 8 feet tall with bioluminescent shoulders and 14 months of silence, had known before I did. The seminar announcement posted on the 34th day. Coalition Military History, Non-Standard Threat Assessment. A Vethari academic historian, traveling as a visiting scholar, would deliver a lecture to the full Upper Division Integration Cohort. Attendance was mandatory for all senior cadets and optional for intake year. I signed up before Owen, Dale, had finished reading the announcement. He looked at me over the top of the screen. "You signed up fast." "Yes," I said. He signed up too without asking why. The lecture hall was the largest room in the academic block, tiered seating, coalition standard, with enough space for every species cluster to sit within their preferred proximity range. The cadets filtered in by instinct, the way people sort themselves when no one has told them to, but everyone has a feeling about where they belong. Calvor did not cluster. He walked to a row in the middle of the hall, moved to the center seat and sat down. The seats around him emptied by that same quiet instinct. No one chose to leave. They simply did not choose to stay. I walked to the row, counted the seats, sat down next to him. The 2 seats on my other side emptied within 30 seconds. Owen sat one row back and slightly to the left, which I think was his way of showing solidarity while maintaining a safety margin, which was honestly fair. Vor did not look at me when I sat down. He was looking at the front of the hall, but the way he was sitting shifted, not dramatically, just the faint reorientation of something that has registered a change in its environment and adjusted accordingly. I opened my note-taking log and waited for the lecture to begin. The historian arrived without introduction. He simply walked to the front of the hall and the room went quiet, because the room always goes quiet when a Vethari enters it, regardless of their age or size. He was old, ancient, by any species standard, his bioluminescence dim and steady, his forearms moving with the particular economy of someone who had stopped spending energy on anything unnecessary decades ago. He had scars across his upper arms in patterns that I later learned were not wounds but records. He began speaking in Vethari. The hall's translation system rendered it into Coalition Standard with a half-second delay, which gave his words a strange doubled quality. You heard the shape of the language first and then the meaning, and they did not always feel like the same thing. He spoke about the Vethari's history of combat, not the battles, the philosophy underneath the battles. He said that when his people were young, they believed power was what made something dangerous. Mass speed, the capacity to destroy quickly. He said they were wrong. He said the most dangerous thing in the known galaxy was not what could destroy fastest. It was what could endure longest while remaining oriented toward one thing. He said there was a Vethari concept for this. He said the word slowly in his own language, and the translation system rendered it as the patience that kills. Kethvor. He said it was the rarest quality they had ever encountered in any species. He said his people had spent 300 years looking for it in every civilization they had contact with. He said they found it in their own young warriors perhaps once in a generation. He did not say they had found it anywhere else. He finished. The hall sat in the particular silence that follows something that has rearranged the air in the room. Then he said something else, in Vethari, not standard, and he was looking directly at Vor. Vor answered also in Vethari, brief, measured. The historian nodded once. He walked out. I looked at Vor. What did he say? I said. Vor was quiet. I waited. I was good at waiting. He said, Vor said finally, that he has not seen it in a non-Vethari. I processed that. Seen what? Another pause, long enough that two cadets in the row ahead of us got up and left before he answered. Kethvor, he said. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about telling him he was wrong. I thought about explaining that what I had was not patience, not the noble kind, not the disciplined kind that warriors cultivate through training and philosophy. What I had was something much less poetic. It was the thing you are left with when everything comfortable has been removed and the only available options are stop or continue, and stopping costs more than you have. It was not a virtue. It was arithmetic. I said, I just know what hungry feels like. Vor turned and looked at me fully, not the peripheral monitoring he usually did. Full, direct attention, the bioluminescence at his shoulders shifting to a slow gold. Yes, he said, that is what I said. I looked at the front of the hall, where the historian had been standing. The room was emptying around us. Owen was still in his seat one row back, very carefully not appearing to listen. I did not say anything else. I closed my note log. I got up and walked out of the hall and down the corridor to the training bay. I ran the course 4 times. Not because I was proving anything. Because it was the only thing I knew how to do with the feeling that was sitting in my chest like something that had been there a long time and had just been handed its correct name. That night I lay in my bunk in the dark and did not sleep for a long time. The winter I did not talk about sat behind my sternum the way it always sat there, dense, calcified, the specific weight of a thing that does not get lighter but that you get stronger around over time. I had never thought of it as something that could be useful. I had thought of it as a thing I had survived, a fact about my past that I carried with me the way you carry a scar, proof of something, but not something you would choose. Cale Vor had looked at me across 14 months of silence and seen something in me that his people spent generations looking for. A Vethari historian had traveled across the coalition and seen it in me in a lecture hall in less than an hour. And what they were seeing was the winter, the hungry months, the arithmetic. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought, I did not know it was a weapon. I thought maybe that is the point. I closed my eyes. 4 hours of sleep. Then the lights came on. Then I got up. The training deployment briefing came on day 40. Standard integration exercise, a decommissioned sector, an unmanned station, mapping and structural assessment. Low risk, educational, the kind of assignment given to intake cohorts to practice coordination without real stakes. Coordinator Vel ran the briefing. Asek was reinstated on academic probation, which meant he was technically our senior cadet for the exercise. He stood at the front of the briefing room with the particular posture of someone who had been reduced and was working very hard to look like he had not. I sat in the second row and took notes. Cale Vor was assigned to the deployment as an upper division observer. He sat at the back of the briefing room. He was not required to do anything. He came anyway. Owen leaned over and whispered, "That is not normal." No, I agreed. He could have sent a report instead. Yes, I said. Owen thought about that. He's watching you. He has been for a while, I said. Owen leaned back. He did not say anything else. The shuttle to the sector took 40 minutes. The station was old, pre-coalition, the kind of structure that had been built by a species no longer in the registry, and had been sitting in dead space for long enough that the metal had taken on the particular quality of things that have been alone for too long. We docked at the secondary port because the primary was sealed by corrosion. The plan was simple. 3 mapping teams, staggered rotation, 2 hours per sweep, full data upload to the Academy relay and back on the shuttle by 1800. Simple. We were 40 minutes into the first sweep when Sara, who was running the environmental sensors at the corridor junction ahead of my team, said, very calmly, "I am reading a non-registration life sign." The hall went quiet. "One," Asik said. Multiple, Sora said, adjusting, a pause, many. The ambush came from the east corridor. They moved fast and they moved organized, which meant this was not opportunistic. The station had been occupied deliberately by a group that had chosen it precisely because it was decommissioned and unmapped and nobody was supposed to come here. We were an academy intake cohort on an educational survey trip. We were the worst possible people to stumble into this. Asek's voice came over the unit channel, sharp and high. All teams, retreat to docking, all teams. And then 2 things happened simultaneously. The docking corridor showed movement on the sensor, which meant retreat was already compromised, and Asek's second command came immediately behind the first, contradicting it. Retreat, no hold. No, retreat to level 2. 3 commands, 10 seconds, all different, all wrong. The squad began to fragment. Not breaking, they were trained. They did not run, but the hesitation was physical. You could see it in the way bodies stopped moving with purpose and started moving with confusion, which in an enclosed corridor with limited visibility is how people get hurt. I was standing next to Bohr, the drawn cadet from intake. He looked at the sensor readout and then at me. I had already done the math. The east approach had 5 signals. The docking corridor had 2. The junction between them had a choke point, a structural narrowing from the old architecture that nothing larger than a brin could pass through side by side. If someone held that choke point, the two separate threats became one manageable line instead of a surrounding pressure. "Boar," I said, "take Sarah and Owen and go left at the junction. Hold the door on the maintenance corridor. The sensor shows it's a dead end. They're not coming from there. Do not move until I say." Boar looked at me. "Osek said." "Osek has given 3 different orders in 10 seconds, I said. "Go left, hold the door." He went. I turned to the remaining 2 cadets, a Tilhari named Fess and a quiet Bryn second year named Cord, and told them what I needed. Fess moved like everything her species moved, fast, small, near the ceiling where the sensors were not calibrated for something that light. Cord went to the choke point. I went to the junction. On the other side of the station, something lit up the corridor. Gold and blue, spreading slow. Kael'vor's threat display had activated. I had never seen it at full range before. It was not aggressive exactly. It was something more fundamental, like pressure, like the feeling in the air before a storm, something ancient and physical that bypassed rational thought and spoke to whatever part of a brain handles the question, "Can I survive what is in this room?" The answer the display gave was, no. 3 of the cell members broke from the east corridor before contact, just turned and ran, back the way they came. That left 2 in the east and 2 in the docking corridor. I spoke into the unit channel, calm, even. "Boar, the docking corridor, the 2 there are moving toward the junction. Hold your position. Fess, the sensor junction on level 2, I need eyes on the east access from above." Fess confirmed. Cord held the choke. Kael'vor moved through the east corridor with a precision that was not violence in the way I understood violence. It was removal, clean, deliberate, efficient. The 2 remaining east corridor contacts went down non-lethally in the time it took me to update the position map. He did not coordinate with me. He was not looking at the map. But every time I adjusted direction, his line shifted to match it, like something calibrated to the same frequency. We had not planned this. We had not spoken about it. We did it anyway. The docking corridor contacts reached the junction and found Boar standing in it. Boar was 7 feet of drawn muscle and not a complicated obstacle. They were not getting through. I flanked from the side corridor. Cord came from the choke. 2 minutes and 19 seconds from the first contact. The station was clear. The debrief was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when something has happened, and no one is quite finished processing it yet. Boar was on the floor of the junction corridor, one arm compressed by a field medical kit. He had taken a hit at the doorway, non-critical, the kind of damage that heals and leaves a story behind it. He was looking at the ceiling with the particular expression of someone reassessing several things at once. I crouched beside him and checked the kit's readout. "You're fine," I said. "The pressure is holding." He looked at me. "You're smaller than my secondary limb." "Yep," I said. "How are you?" He stopped, tried a different direction. "How did you?" "I've been hungry before," I said. "Eat your field ration when they bring it. You need the calories." I stood up and moved to check on Fess and Cord. I did not see his expression when I walked away. Owen told me about it later. He said Boar looked like a person who had been handed a map of a country he had been living in for years and was realizing for the first time that the map and the country were not the same shape. Coordinator Vel reviewed the tactical record herself. She was in the debrief room with the senior faculty representative for 3 hours. Owen told me later, he had been near the door, that she ran the footage of the action sequence 4 times and said nothing after the 3rd run and the 4th. The senior faculty representative said, "The intake cadet issued 7 positional directives that superseded the senior cadet's commands." Vel said yes. All 7 were validated by post-action analysis. "Yes," Vel said again. A pause. "And Kael'vor?" Coordinated responsively with her positional calls, Vel said, without prior agreement, without a shared communication channel, without any established protocol. Another pause. That is, the faculty representative said carefully, not something Vethari do. No, Vel said, it is not. She closed the footage. She picked up a classification tablet. She changed Mara, Voss's threat rating in the academy system. No one told me what she changed it to, not that day. I found out the way I found out most things at ICMA, not because someone announced it, but because the environment changed and I noticed. On day 43, I walked into the mess hall and sat down. No one said anything. Not the nothing of being ignored, the nothing of being acknowledged in the way that does not require comment. I ate my ration. The compressed gray thing still tasted the same. I had stopped noticing the taste either way. Osek requested a transfer on day 45. He was assigned to a logistics coordination track at a secondary academy in the outer systems, which was, if you were being precise about it, the reassignment that had been recommended for me on day 3. The irony was not lost on me. I did not spend much time on it. He passed me in the corridor on his way out, his pack over one shoulder, the particular posture of someone who has reached the end of a chapter and is not entirely sure what the next one looks like. He stopped. I stopped. I didn't know what I was looking at, he said. It was not an apology. It was something more honest than an apology. It was an accurate statement, delivered plainly, by someone who had run out of the resources to be anything other than accurate. Most people don't, I said. That's fine. I meant it. Not generously, just factually. Most people, when they see small, red, fragile, it is a reasonable inference based on available data. The data just was not complete. He walked past me to the exit bay. I watched him go. Then I went to the training bay. The simulation scores updated on day 47. My threat rating in the tactical AI had been recalibrated. Priority target. The combat simulation now tagged me as first contact neutralization priority, the highest risk designation the system assigned. I sat with that for a moment, then I loaded the scenario and ran it. The AI got one targeting solution off before I closed the angle and removed the threat source. Lord have mercy, I said to the empty room. I reloaded and ran it again. The new intake class arrived on day 50. I watched from the second-floor rail as they were processed, the intake scanner running its green light over each cadet in turn, the hall filling with the specific noise of species sorting themselves into unfamiliar spaces. I saw the Tilhari cadet when the scanner flagged an error on her metrics. Small, fast-looking, the kind of small that reads immediately as wrong place to every eye in the room. A cluster of larger cadets watched. There was a low sound that was not quite laughter but was in the neighborhood of it. The Tilhari cadet stepped off the platform. She looked at her bunk assignment printout. She found her bunk. She looked up at it, top rack, same as mine had been, and without any hesitation, without looking around to see if anyone was watching, she jumped and caught the rail and pulled herself up. Clean, no wasted motion. I stood at the rail and watched her arrange her pack. I thought I could go down there. I could find her in the first week and tell her what it looks like from the other side. I could be the person who explains that it gets easier, or that it does not get easier but you get better at it, which is different. I thought she does not need that from me. What she needs is the course at 300, the gray ration, the documentation log, the 18 days before the first board result comes back and the number has moved up. She needs her own winter. I cannot give her mine. I watched until she settled on her bunk and began sorting her equipment with quiet, methodical attention. I went back to my corridor. Vor was at the observation deck when I got there. The long window at the end of the academic block that looked outward. No station panels. Just the dark and the faint scatter of light that meant stars at a distance too great to name. He was standing at the window with the same absolute stillness he brought to everything. 4 arms folded. The bioluminescence at his shoulders cycling slowly, gold shifting into blue and back again. I walked to the window and stood beside him. We stood there for a long time. This was, I had come to understand, his version of a conversation. The Vethari gave attention as a form of language, and silence as a form of trust, and proximity as a form of commitment. Standing beside someone at the observation window was not nothing. It was, in his language, something close to, I am choosing to be here. I looked at the stars. Outside, the dark went on for longer than anything I had words for. What did the historian say? I said finally, when he left, the long thing, the one that wasn't translated. Vor was quiet for long enough that 3 stars shifted by a fraction of a degree in the window. He said, Vor said slowly, like he was choosing each word with the same care you use when you are not sure the language on the other end can hold what you are trying to put in it. Among my people, when a young warrior shows Kethvor, true Kethvor, not discipline, not training, but the kind that grew from something real, we give them a name. I waited. Not the name their family gave them, he said. A different name, the name that says what they are underneath the rest of it. What name did he give me? I said. The longest silence yet. Long enough that Owen, who had apparently followed me to the observation deck, and was standing in the corridor entrance pretending to check something on his data screen, shifted his weight twice. Vethmai, Vor said. The word sounded like something geological in his language. Heavy, slow, built for distance. What does it mean? I said. He looked at the stars. The hunger that does not end, he said. I stood at the window. Outside, the galaxy kept going. Enormous. Indifferent. Full of species who had never had to count calories against a February that did not intend to let up, who had never had to decide which 3 things they were allowed to want today because wanting 4 was a kind of luxury they could not sustain. Full of systems that had read me as a non-combat asset and recommended me for logistics. Full of AI calibration systems that had taken 47 days to update what I was. The hunger that does not end. I turned the words over. I thought, that is not how I would have described it. I would have said I was just bad at stopping. I would have said I had been hungry for long enough that the hunger stopped being an emergency and became a condition, which is different. I would have said it had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with the math of options. And when the options run out, there is only one direction left and you take it because there is no other geometry available. I would not have called it a name. I would not have thought it was the kind of thing that got a name. The hunger that does not end. It was a good name. It was the most accurate name for the thing I was that anyone had ever given me, in any language on any world. I did not say that. Vor looked at the window. I looked at the window. Owen stood in the corridor entrance with his data screen and was very professionally not saying anything. The stars kept moving. Everything kept moving. That was the thing about being small. You notice that the large things keep moving regardless, and you learn to move with them or you got left behind, and being left behind was not something the math supported. So you moved. Thank you, I said. Vor did not answer. He did not need to. We stood at the window for a long time. The smallest cadet in the academy, the most dangerous thing in the known galaxy. The silence between us was not empty. It never had been. It was the kind of silence that 2 things share when they have recognized each other across a very long distance. Across species, across language, across every system that had looked at one of them and said wrong place, not built for this, non-combat asset, too small, too soft, too quiet, too still. The kind of silence that says, I saw you. Before the rankings. Before the deployment. Before the name. I saw you. And I did not look away. I looked out at the dark and the stars and the impossible distance between things, and I thought about the winter I did not talk about, and I thought about my mother's hands, and I thought about the gray ration that always tasted the same, and the course at 300, and the documentation log, and the way the intake scanner had beeped 3 times and then paused because it did not have a category for what I was. I thought, it still does not have a category for what I am. That was fine. Kael'vor had a word for it. Vethmai. The hunger that does not end. I was going to carry that name for a long time. I was going to carry it quietly, the way I carried everything inside, where the cold could not reach it. And I was going to keep showing up. Tomorrow. And the day after. And every day until the universe ran out of days to offer me. Which, given the math, was going to be a very long time.